Wasting no time, straight into it. We've got a lot to cover, teaching you guys how to straddle planche using these incredibly underrated progressions. The planche journey. People say it looks like this between advanced tuck and straddle planche, but the good news is with these forgotten or underrated progressions I'm about to teach you, your planche journey is actually going to look like this. And the main thing to point out is there's many different pathways you can take on this planche journey, not one path like everyone seems to say. The first forgotten progression you need to know about is the super advanced tuck. So the super advanced tuck is very similar to the advanced tuck, so it's a very good progression to start off, getting you closer to that straddle planche. All we're doing is we're going into that advanced tuck, bringing our knees out to 90 degrees, but then we're going even further, so the hips are open more than 90 degrees. This requires more hip extension strength, which of course we need for the straddle planche. It also requires a lot more core strength to keep your pelvis posteriorly tilted. This one is a very good one if the knee position for the advanced tuck and the posterior pelvic tilt didn't come too hard for you. It might be very easy for you to just bring your legs out a little bit further to get into the super advanced tuck position, and maybe you've even been doing it by accident when you over lean a little bit. Next up, for the forgotten and underrated progressions, we have the advanced frog planche. Now I have talked about this one before in some other videos, so some of you might know about this one already, but this is a first step to mimicking the straddle planche in terms of hip abduction, because we're bringing our knees and our legs away from that center body line when we get into this frog position. And how do you perform this progression? Well, it's similar to the tuck planche. You go in more of a tuck planche to start, and then you bring your knees up and out. So you're bringing them out laterally, but then you're trying to bring them towards an advanced tuck position. And this gets you in that frog planche position. So in some ways it's easier than the advanced tuck because you're not bringing your knees downwards, which takes so much core strength to do, and you have to maintain that posterior pelvic tilt a lot. In this progression, you don't need so much posterior pelvic tilt, but you still need to keep going with that posterior pelvic tilt. Don't let your lower body arch. This is a good one if hip extension doesn't really come naturally to you and you want to work on your hip abduction. This method, where you can use different progressions in almost any order to learn the straddle planche, I like to call the flow method. This is because it's like a stream of water that flows. It's pretty arbitrary. There's no specific points, it just flows. Next up for the forgotten and underrated progressions is the super advanced frog planche. Now I think you guys know what's coming. The super advanced frog planche, all we're doing is we're bringing our knees out, bringing more hip extension so our knees are further than 90 degrees. Now we're getting more hip extension involved into that hip abduction. So you see how we're getting closer to that straddle planche, but incrementally. So now we're getting close to that fully extended knee position of the straddle planche. So you see how our leg is almost getting straight now. We're kind of getting closer to that. That's what we want, and is a minuscule increase in strength, which is an actual realistic thing for you guys to learn. Next up, we have the straddle half lay. By using either the super advanced tuck planche or the advanced frog planche, you should be able to reach the straddle half lay. Now before we move on, I just want to reiterate something very important. You can get the straddle planche without all these extra progressions just by doing assisted straddle planche, handstand to straddle planche negatives, things like that, simplifying your program to just the essential stuff. And if you need to know the essential exercises that are dynamic as well, I have a calisthenics tier list you can watch after watching this video. However, these progressions I'm showing you in this video are going to help you for those of you that are stuck and that are sick of just trying things that just aren't working for you, and maybe these will work better. But anyway, back to the straddle half lay. How do we do this? We go into the advanced tuck and then we increase that hip extension until we're flat. So now we're flat, similar to the full planche. So the unique thing about the flow method is from here you could learn the full planche if you wanted to. So what you do is if you're really strong in this movement, you start bringing your knees together. That's when you're in a full half lay planche. And then what you do is you start bringing knee extension into it. That's where you start bringing your leg out into that full planche position, and then over time you'll get stronger and maybe be able to hold the full planche just by doing this and a few other accessory exercises. But this video is about the straddle planche, so I'll carry on and tell you how to get the straddle planche from here. Of course, one method is to keep those knees out laterally and just start extending at the knee so your legs come out. Eventually, over time, your legs will drop slightly, but bring them up and you're in that straddle planche. The next forgotten and underrated progression is the pike straddle planche. Now this is a progression I love because it's one of the methods I use to enter into the planche, and that's because I learned the straddle planche this way. So the downside of this progression is it's very hard to protract fully in this progression. So what I'd recommend is, if you want to go for this progression, is you do some extra protraction work. You want to work on your protraction throughout your planche journey, and the downside of this progression is it gets neglected. So make sure you work on your protraction. What the pike straddle planche teaches you is lower body tension. So it works on keeping your legs straight and abducted. And this is something you wouldn't have worked on before if you've just been doing the advanced tuck. So that's why I really like the pike straddle planche. You can just focus on keeping your legs straight, and then you start leaning a bit more forward, start squeezing your glutes, and then you bring everything up into that straddle planche. So that's another method or pathway to learn the straddle planche. And guys, if you're liking this video, the tips I'm giving you, the progressions, then I'm gonna ask, please planche push up on that like button and turn it blue, please. The last and final pathway and forgotten and underrated progression is the low straddle planche. To those of you that are opposed to bad form and want to keep it strict, and technically the pike straddle planche is technically bad form, although it works on the lower body, it's technically a bad form straddle planche. So for those of you that want to avoid that and just want to avoid getting into bad habits of piking the hips and all that, the low straddle planche is for you. This is because you can keep perfect form throughout your training. So when you do your attempts, you just do a planche lean into a low straddle planche. You can keep an entirely straight body line, but of course this progression is quite hard to learn. It's pretty similar to a straddle planche, you're just doing it low. Over time, as you keep working this low straddle planche, it'll become a slightly less low straddle planche, then slightly less low, until you're in parallel to the floor and you're in that full straddle planche. And then you've learned it with perfect form, perfect protraction the entire way throughout your planche journey. So this method is for those of you that may want to take a bit more time to learn the straddle planche, but want that clean, hollow body form. I want to reiterate that no progression is essential. There's different ways of learning the planche, but you do want good form and good muscle activation. That's what's most important. So whatever progression you choose that activates the correct muscles and gets you in the correct form, that's what you want to do. But you need some dynamic exercises, because as I mentioned, if you don't include any dynamic exercises, you're gonna really get stuck with your planche training. And in this video, I have a full tier list of the dynamic exercises so you know exactly what ones to include in your training.